customizing the hip belt shape on the larger packs with a separate hip belt. So that means peak aspiration, guiding light, effortless rhythm, load limo, an earth glider, Featherlite Freedom, and natural balance. So Davey's going to put the pack on. And do up the hip belt. And I am going to check whether the pressure is even at the top and bottom of the pack, or whether it's digging in a little bit at the bottom or digging in a bit at the top. So how does it feel?
The top's fine. It is digging in down here.
Okay.
Yep.
So you'll often find that women with very flared hips, the pack as it comes normally will dig in a bit at the bottom, and we have to adjust the angle of the hip belt ends. So Davey will take the pack off. Now the hip belt is composed of 3 parts, 2 end parts and a center part, which is behind the mesh. So we'll undo the mesh, and you can see there's a central plate, and normally the pack comes with they join together with Velcro, and the Velcro, the edge of the plate is parallel to the Velcro on the hip belt. But in this situation we want to angle the hip belt ends up slightly to make the circumference of the hip belt larger at the bottom, because we had more pressure at the bottom of the hip belt. So you can see I've angled the hip belt ends up, and it's wider gap on the Velcro at the bottom compared to the top. So we'll do the same on both sides. Release that, angle it up, close it up again, and Davey can put it back on and see how that is.
Good.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Now, if you pull the center of the loop, the hip belt loop, you'll be tightening the hip belt evenly, top and bottom. If you pull on the bottom of the loop only, you tighten at the bottom more than at the top, and vice versa. This top webbing strap actually runs through the top of the hip belt, and by tightening that, you're actually custom bending the shape of the hip belt to match the top of your hip bone. It's actually curving over the top of your hip bone. These little stretch panels are designed to actually sit over. There's a point at the front of your hip bone, and ideally your point of your hip bone should be positioned in the middle of that stretch panel, because that's very flexible and that's where you normally get bruising. Now if, for example, you found that the stretch panel was behind that point, then you could lengthen the hip belt at the back by undoing the Velcro and moving the Velcro apart. If you found that that was too far around the front, vice versa, you could actually shorten the hip belt at the back by undoing the Velcro, repositioning the hip belt ends a bit closer on the back plate, and then redoing the Velcro. So you can really fine-tune the hip belt to match your hip shape. The top of the hip belt should always be above your hip bone, and the bottom of the hip belt is just around the top of your hip bone. If it's too low, if it slips down, it'll put pressure on your socket of your leg, so it needs to be up this height. And that's where we always start when we're fitting a pack. Get the hip belt the right height, then you adjust the shoulder straps afterwards. Now let's look at the shoulder straps. You could do up your sternum strap. You've got two buckles you can adjust to adjust your shoulder straps. This bottom strap, by pulling on that, you're putting more loading on your shoulders. Your top strap here determines how close the top of the pack is to your shoulders. So you tighten this one first. No need to do it extremely tightly. Just take out the slack. If there's some slack between the black web behind and the grey web, just take out that slack, and then you can pull this in just to get the top of the pack fitting snugly against your shoulders. There's another adjustment we can do, which is adjustment of the back length. At the bottom of the back panel there's a little web loop. If I pull on that, I'm actually pulling the shoulder straps down at the back, and I'm actually shortening the back panel. So can you feel what's happening there?
Yes.
Now if I want to lengthen the back panel, there's a little navy web up here. I have to give that a bit of a jerk, and that raises the back panel. So the beauty of this system is you can actually fine-tune it. You can shorten the back panel with the pack on, but you don't want to tighten it so much that you're putting a lot of weight on your shoulders. You want most of the weight to be on your hips, and that's especially true if you're using the balance pockets, because there's no need to have there's no pull back force on your shoulders if you're using the balance pockets, because it's cancelled by the pull forwards force. So you don't have to have the shoulder straps so tight, and you can get all the weight onto the front and back of your hip belt.